$5. That's what tourists pay for a photo with Thailand's long-neck women. $5 for a selfie that funds what experts are quietly calling a human zoo. $5 that's slowly destroying an entire culture while the world watches and clicks. I thought I understood cultural tourism until I discovered what's really happening in these villages north of Chiang Mai. What I found will change how you see every authentic cultural experience for the rest of your life. The Kayan women you see in travel brochures aren't just wearing traditional jewelry. They're trapped in a system so complex and heartbreaking that it breaks every rule of ethical tourism. And honestly, most visitors have no idea they're participating in something that's literally killing the culture they came to preserve. The $5 photo that destroyed lives. Here's what that $5 photo actually pays for. Those above 12 years old receive 1,500 baht. That's approximately 200,000 Myanmar kyat. While those under 12 receive 750 baht. That's about $46 per month for adults, 23 for children, but only if they wear the rings. Let me put this in perspective. A Kayan woman wearing 20 pounds of brass coils around her neck earns less in a month than what most people spend on coffee in a week. Meanwhile, tour companies charge $60 to $80 per visitor to see her. The math is staggering. She earns $300 per year while generating thousands in revenue for others. But here's what breaks my heart. These allowances are only given to women who wear brass coils. Think about what that means. Your income depends on maintaining a tradition that's becoming a performance. Your survival depends on staying frozen in time for tourists who want to see something authentic. This isn't cultural preservation, it's economic coercion disguised as heritage tourism. The women who choose to remove their rings lose their only source of income in a country where they can't work legally. Ask yourself this. If preserving culture requires poverty, are we actually preserving anything meaningful? Why tradition actually means survival. Most tourists think the neck rings are about beauty standards or ancient rituals. They're wrong. The brass coils were warfare armor, life or death protection during tribal conflicts that saved countless lives. When enemy tribes attacked, they aimed for the neck. The brass rings deflected blades and arrows. What looks decorative to Instagram tourists was literally survival technology their ancestors perfected over centuries of conflict. The rings also identified tribal membership during raids. In the chaos of battle, that brass gleam meant the difference between friend and enemy, between life and death. Every coil told a story of survival, resistance, and identity. But here's what tourism has done to this warrior tradition. It's turned survival armor into costume jewelry. Ancient protection became performance art. The spiritual significance got lost in translation for tour groups who want photos, not understanding. Girls first start to wear rings when they are around 5 years old. What used to be a choice made by adult women in response to tribal warfare is now a childhood decision made by families desperate for tourist income. The tradition that once meant survival now traps the very people it was designed to protect. How's that for irony? The tourism trap nobody talks about. Denied formal refugee status and therefore the right to work in Thailand, they are allowed to remain here as a tourist attraction. Read that again. They can't work, they can't leave, they can't get real jobs or education. But they can be looked at. The Thai government created a perfect storm. The long-neck women are a tribe of the Karen people from Myanmar or Burma, who fled their country across the border to Thailand due to military persecution. They're refugees, but not officially. They're stateless, but not protected. They're human beings, but they're treated like exhibits. Thai authorities actually negotiated to keep them in Thailand, while repatriating other tribespeople to the Burma war zone. Think about that. Other refugees got sent back to war zones. The Kayan women got kept as tourist attractions. This isn't accidental, it's deliberate policy. The villages are designed to keep them dependent on tourism. No other economic opportunities exist because no other opportunities are allowed to exist. The cultural preservation narrative is brilliant marketing. It makes tourists feel good about their visit while hiding the economic imprisonment underneath. You're not exploiting anyone, you're supporting cultural heritage, right? Wrong, you're supporting a system that keeps an entire people trapped in poverty for your entertainment. What happens when you remove the rings? This is where it gets physically dangerous. After decades of wearing 20-pound brass coils, the neck muscles atrophy completely. The spine adapts to unnatural positioning. The entire skeletal structure changes. Removing the rings isn't like taking off jewelry, it's like removing a permanent medical device that's been supporting your body for 30 years. The neck can't hold up the head without the brass support. The muscles have forgotten how to work. Some women who've tried to remove the rings experienced severe injury. Others couldn't risk it because of the potential for permanent disability or death. What appears to be a removable accessory becomes a life sentence most women never chose freely. But here's the cruelest part. Young women who want to escape to cities for education or jobs face an impossible choice. Keep the rings and stay trapped in the village economy. Remove them and risk physical harm while losing your only source of income. The tradition that once protected them in warfare now imprisons them in peacetime. Their ancestors' survival tool became their grandchildren's cage. Girls first start to wear rings when they are around 5 years old. 5 years old, before they can read or write or dream of what they might become. Families pull daughters from school to start wearing rings and earning tourist money. Immediate survival trumps long-term opportunity every time when you're this desperate. While the world watches their exotic beauty, an entire generation loses access to futures beyond the village gates. The teenage girls I spoke with talked about university dreams, career ambitions, life plans that extended far beyond brass coils and tourist photos. But those dreams crash against economic reality. Education costs money. The rings earn money. The choice becomes obvious and heartbreaking. This creates a generational trap. Mothers who never had educational opportunities can't encourage daughters to pursue what they never experienced themselves. The cycle continues because the system provides no alternative. When your culture becomes your only economic asset, preserving it means sacrificing everything else, including the future. The World Tourism Organization has strict guidelines against human exhibitions. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples protects cultural autonomy. International law recognizes the right to education, work, and freedom of movement. Visits to the village are part of the standard tour packages offered to visitors to Chiang Mai. Government-sanctioned tours to see people who can't legally work or leave. What's considered exploitation everywhere else becomes cultural experience when poverty makes people desperate enough to participate. The same governments that would shut down human zoos in their own countries promote them as authentic cultural tourism when they happen to refugees. The ethical tourism industry knows this is wrong. That's why responsible tour companies refuse to offer these visits. But plenty of others don't care as long as tourists keep paying. Every guidebook that recommends these visits, every tour company that profits from them, every government that allows them is complicit in a system they know violates basic human dignity. 20 pounds of brass wrapped around your neck for decades. Think about what that does to your body. Severe spinal compression, restricted breathing, circulation problems, permanent skeletal deformation. The physical price of maintaining this tradition is literally shortening lifespans. But discussing health consequences threatens the tourism narrative. Sick women don't make good photo opportunities. Medical care is limited in these remote villages. Treating complications from the rings requires specialists who aren't available to stateless refugees. The women suffer in silence because complaining might discourage tourists. The very thing that's supposed to preserve their culture is destroying their bodies. And the tourism industry that profits from their appearance has no interest in addressing the health crisis it's creating. Kayan Lawi, men and women who have fled conflict in Kayah state to Thailand for over 30 years, live stateless in villages as reluctant tourist attractions frozen in time, and well, reluctant really is the key word here. Given real alternatives, most Kayan teenagers reject the rings and head to cities for education and jobs. The tradition survives only where economic desperation leaves no other options. It's preservation through poverty, not pride. The young women who escape speak multiple languages, pursue careers and live modern lives. They're proud of their heritage, but they refuse to be imprisoned by it. They want to honor their ancestors' survival, not repeat their grandmother's suffering. This is what cultural evolution actually looks like when it's not frozen for tourists. Traditions adapt, people choose. Culture lives and breathes and grows instead of just performing for cameras. But, the tourism industry needs them to stay the same. Change threatens the fantasy of discovering untouched culture in a modern world. Try filming beyond the tourist areas. Try interviewing women about their real lives, their dreams, their choices. Try showing modern houses, cell phones and contemporary struggles instead of just traditional dress and brass coils. Local government officials actively discourage filming the reality of daily life because it disrupts the carefully curated experience. The so-called authentic village experience is theatre designed to hide the complex modern reality underneath. What you see on tours is performance. What you don't see is everything else. The discussions about freedom, the dreams of education, the desire for choice, the resentment about being treated like exhibits. The most authentic thing about these villages is, honestly, just how inauthentic the tourist experience actually is. The Kayan situation isn't unique. It's really a preview of what happens when cultural tourism meets economic inequality and government complicity. What began as a genuine fascination with their unique culture soon transformed into a significant source of income and, unfortunately, a trap. Indigenous communities worldwide are watching what happens here. The Maasai in Kenya, the Himba in Namibia, Aboriginal communities in Australia. They're all facing similar pressures to perform their culture for tourists instead of living it authentically. Every culture facing commodification is asking the same question. How do you preserve traditions without becoming a prisoner of them? How do you share heritage without selling your humanity? The answer isn't boycotting cultural tourism entirely. It's demanding that cultural tourism serve the communities it claims to support, not exploit them. Some received a minimum salary of 9,000 Thai baht per month. That's about $270. Tour companies charge $60 to $80 per visitor. Do the math. A single tour group of 10 people generates more revenue than a Kayan woman earns in 2 months. The massive wealth inequality driving this system proves its exploitation, not cultural exchange or economic empowerment. Real economic empowerment would mean the Kayan people controlling their own tourism, setting their own prices, and keeping the majority of the profits. It would mean having choices about when to participate and when to say no. Instead, they're employees in their own cultural performance, earning minimum wage to be themselves for strangers. So, what anthropologists are quietly saying is that academic researchers studying the Kayan report the tradition is rapidly evolving under tourism pressure. Ancient meanings are being lost while performative elements are being added. The culture that is supposedly being preserved is actually being fundamentally altered by the preservation efforts themselves. Traditional rituals that once had spiritual significance now happen on tourist schedules. Stories that once carried deep meaning get condensed into 5-minute explanations for tour groups. The sacred becomes commercial. This isn't preservation, it's transformation. The culture exists now primarily for outside consumption rather than internal meaning. When tradition becomes performance, it stops being tradition. The Myanmar connection nobody mentions is that political conflict and military retribution occurred in the 1980s, making most Kayan families refugees whose so-called traditional lifestyle is partly a survival strategy in a foreign country where they have no legal status. Their cultural display masks a deeper story of displacement, statelessness, and limited legal protections. They didn't choose to be tourist attractions. They chose to survive, and this was the only option available. The rings that once protected them from enemy tribes now protect them from deportation. Performing tradition became their refugee status. Being exotic became their visa. Understanding this context, well, it really changes everything about how we see their situation. This isn't cultural celebration, it's survival strategy in a world that offers them no other options. Why your visit changes everything is because every tourist interaction influences whether young Kayan women choose traditional modernity. Every photo taken, every dollar spent, every conversation had shapes individual life decisions. Your camera and curiosity, honestly, carry more power than you realize in influencing human lives. When you visit, you're not just observing culture, you're participating in economic decisions that determine whether teenage girls go to school or start wearing rings. That's a responsibility most tourists never consider. You came for photos, but you're actually voting with your wallet on how these families should live their lives. The question becomes, are you comfortable with that level of influence over other people's futures? The question that breaks your conscience is this: if preserving this tradition requires poverty, isolation, and limited choices for the women practicing it, are we actually preserving culture or exploiting vulnerability for our own fascination with the exotic? The honest answer reveals everything about how we view human dignity versus cultural performance. Do we want to preserve traditions that serve the people practicing them, or traditions that serve our own desire to see something different and Instagram-worthy? Real cultural preservation would mean these women having choices. It would mean economic opportunities beyond tourism. It would mean education, healthcare, legal status, and the freedom to adapt their traditions to modern life. Instead, we've created a system where tradition means imprisonment and preservation means poverty. The Kayan women aren't disappearing because they're abandoning their culture. They're disappearing because they're finally getting the chance to choose their own lives instead of performing for ours. Standing in those villages, watching teenagers dream of universities while wearing brass coils that will determine their entire future, I realized something that honestly changed everything for me. We're not preserving culture, we're preserving our own fantasy of what culture should look like. The most authentic thing about the Kayan people isn't their brass rings or their traditional dress, it's their resilience, their intelligence, their dreams of something better for their children. It's their quiet resistance to being frozen in time for our entertainment. True cultural preservation would mean supporting their choices, not limiting them. It would mean economic opportunities that don't require performing tradition. And it would mean respecting their humanity more than our curiosity. If this changed how you see cultural tourism, hit subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because every time we choose responsible travel over Instagram-worthy exploitation, we vote for a world where culture lives and breathes instead of performing for cameras. Next week, we're exploring what ethical cultural tourism actually looks like when communities control their own narratives. You won't believe what's possible when travelers serve cultures instead of consuming them. Remember, wherever life takes you, home isn't just a place, it's a perspective. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Your curiosity makes these stories possible, so keep exploring, keep dreaming, and we'll see you in the next adventure right here on Beyond Borders.